Well, welcome and thank you for watching. We're continuing our journey in learning the London system, becoming more proficient at it by utilizing the chess.com bots in order to practice. We want to know more about the structure of the London, the strategies, and the tactics. And today's opponent is Mina 700 as we're working our way up the ratings ladder of the chess.com bots. The London opens up with d4. Mina responds with e6. We continue our development with bishop to f4. And Mina responds with a move that Aaron had made, and we're familiar with this, and that is bringing the queen out early to the h4 square, thereby targeting this square. Now, once again, do not become myopic about the f2 square and forget about the possibility of the queen capturing an unprotected bishop at this time. But again, the third move in the London is e3, thereby protecting both the bishop and the pawn. And Mina responds by bringing the dark squared bishop to b4, thereby placing our king in check. We have two responses to this, potentially. One is taking the b knight to d2, and the other is moving the c-pawn to c3. As I shared with you before, I really prefer moving the c-pawn up because it immediately puts pressure on the bishop, and our opponent has to decide what to do about this potential encounter. Mina responds by moving the bishop back to d6, thereby targeting my dark square bishop as well. Now, there's a tactic that I have learned from the intermediate bots, and I've termed it one-upsmanship. And it basically goes like this. Well, you want to attack one of my pieces. What I'm going to do is attack one of your higher valued pieces. And then we'll decide, where we go from there. And certainly in the development of the London, the G knight moving to f3 will put pressure on the queen. So the tactic here is, okay, you want to take my bishop, that's fine. I'm going to take your queen in exchange for that. And so now our opponent needs to make a decision regarding this. And Mina chooses wrongly. She moves to g6, thereby similar to Aaron, hanging the queen. Easy decision. We take the queen. Mina responds with a6. And we're going to continue on in our development by bringing the b knight to the d2 square. Mina responds by bringing the king up. Now, by moving the king, all attempts at castling now are negated. And we need to understand that the king is going to be, located in the central portion of the chessboard. And so we'll need to adjust our tactics accordingly to that. So I did want to mention this. There's another tactic that I learned from the intermediate bots. And that is sometimes I would threaten one of the pieces of the intermediate bot, and the bot would say, okay, I'll make this exchange here if you want, but I want to make it from a more advantageous square, one in which I will gain some kind of positional value after the exchange. And so as I looked at the possibility of my next move, this is what I saw, not only positional advantage if we have the exchange of moving the pawn here and then having control of these two squares, but also by moving here, I immediately put pressure on the rook. And as we've seen in previous games, sometimes the bots do nothing about that, and you can, take a piece that's been hung. So this is what I did, and encouraging the exchange, but Mina responds by moving the knight up to block, and so we still have this dynamic going on. But it's kind of at this point that I can continue on in my development with bishop to d3, obviously opening up the corridor should I choose to castle at some point and protect my king. And Mina responds by this exchange, bishop for bishop, so I'm going to respond with the setup that I had, bringing the pawn here and exercising control over these two squares. Mina responds by moving the rook and thereby hanging another piece. So once again, very easy decision. Just take the knight, put the king in check, And now the king must decide either to come forward and take or to retreat and protect. So at this point, it's good to kind of reassess, as I said before, after a flurry of activity, reassess the strategy, the positions of the pieces. Where is the opponent's king? What kind of position are they in? What possible venues and lines of attack that we have? So let's go over a couple of those. One of the first things I'm seeing is the potential for this square and this knight to get to that square. I've utilized that square in games before, previous, and this is a good advantageous square. Of course, we have this pawn protecting it right now, but at some point that could be dealt with in the future. We have the lines of attack of the queen also along the light square diagonals. We have, the bishop coming over, targeting this way, the light squared bishop coming here and targeting that way as well along that diagonal. We also have, again, opportunity to maybe bring their king to castle and protect it. So one of the concerns that I have is this knight at h4 with no real push forward. There's just no squares that are available to it right now. So there's always the possibility of maybe reposition and then maybe begin to redeploy in some fashion. And that's the route that I chose, is I want to make sure I have all of the pieces that I need to continue the assault. And the knight here on the sideboards really is not the most advantageous place for a knight. So let's begin to move it more toward the center. Mina responds with a gift, if you ask me, and that is this c5 move, because if you recall, one of the targeted squares was here, but the c-pawn was protecting it. So with this movement, I now have the opportunity to move my knight there, and that would be very advantageous to a future assault. Mina responds with the king moving to d8. I'm going to go ahead and move into the slot that I had anticipated before as a possibility. And one of the things I can encourage you to do that I still do to this day, and that is when you see some potential lines of attack, just keep a pad of paper next to you and write down that, like, knight at d2 to d6. Because sometimes when you get into the flurry of activity with the game, you kind of forget about some of these good lines of attack, and you kind of get caught up in the action. So writing these things down can help you, look at your notes and remember, come back to what potentially could be very advantageous for you in the game. So Mina responds with another gift in my mind, and that is moving the b-pawn to b6. The reason I say that is one of the lines of attack that we looked at was moving the light squared bishop and attacking this way. Well, by moving the b-pawn up, that just gives us, an open diagonal here to put pressure on the rook. And again, if the bishop comes out, it's a take-take scenario. So we're in a very good position right now. Mina responds with a5. And now as I look at, the options here, certainly just going ahead and taking the rook, since it's without cost and without threat, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And Mina responds with another pawn move, very similar to Aaron, with so many pawn moves. And again, I understand that these bots are programmed in order to make, mistakes and blunders and moves to nowhere. But that's okay, because I need to learn how to take advantage of those, because when you get into the more intermediate bots, you're not always going to have those kinds of moves made. And they're obviously programmed to be much smarter. But when I was starting out, I wasn't much smarter than, the 700 bot. And so I need to learn these tactics, and it's always beneficial to just kind of review what are good attacking lines and establish that as part of your repertoire as a chess player. So now having Mina respond to h6, I'm really looking at this very weak pawn at b6. It is protecting these two pawns, but it itself is not protected. And really bringing the queen out and having a line on that would certainly be advantageous for me. And that's what I did. Bring the queen out. This, again, we looked at the diagonal lines of the queen. This is one of those. Take advantage of it and target this very weak pawn with really no way for black to, excuse me, to protect it. So this is, the option that Mina chose, probably deploying here to come back, because looking at this scenario of bringing the king up and capturing the b6 pawn is going to immediately put the king in check. It would be checkmate if there was no way in which to protect. So Mina brings the knight up here to a6, looking to move back to this square to protect. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. So now, once again, let's reevaluate after a flurry of activity, especially as we close in, and we need to make sure that our movements are very precise in checkmating. So this pawn eliminates the possibility of the king moving to that square for an escape. Our influence over this square, the king can obviously not move to the e8 square, so we really have the king boxed in. I just need to find a very efficient way by which to continue the assault. And if you'll notice something, the knight is also exerting influence over this bishop. And should I move my queen here, we have intersecting lines between the queen and the knight at the c8 square that will be unstoppable. And so that's what I did. I moved to the b8 square looking to target this and checkmate. Really nothing that black can do at this point. This is a meaningless capture because I move on in and it is checkmate, 20 move checkmate in this game. So several things that we were able to learn from this and utilize the London system, the structure, the strategies, and the tactics. Hope you enjoyed this game. We're going to move on to the second game with Mina 700, and I hope you'll join me there. Thank you for watching.